Hi, and welcome to this video series where we're going to talk about Microsoft Foundry. In this part 1, we will start with a high-level overview what it is, and then we'll dive into the various topics in subsequent videos. So let's get started. So if I could only give you a single sentence of what this is, it would be this: Microsoft's one-stop shop for all things AI. As in, a company is able to manage, develop all their AI solution in a single portal with Microsoft's known expertise in enterprise stuff like compliance and governance. Before we go into the offerings, let's quickly have a look at the history and rebranding that led to Microsoft Foundry. What Foundry is today started out as something called Microsoft Cognitive Services. This was back in the early days of AI, where vision, speech, and language capabilities were the thing. It was before GenAI. You will still see the cognitive service name popping up in various technical things, permissions, and so on in the day. But after the ChatGPT moment happened in November 2022, everything was suddenly AI, so Cognitive Service was rebranded to Azure AI Services. And this is where we got the Azure OpenAI service, which we also have as a NuGet package today. And we still use that if we want to work with individual modules in the Microsoft Foundry. The next years was the maturity phase of AI, and back then everything just happened in the Azure portal as services. But in Build 2025, the Azure AI Foundry was introduced, which was for a very brief time also called the Azure OpenAI Foundry. But this shifted to this one-stop mentality, more models than just OpenAI, and it became a dedicated portal on ai.azure.com. So here we don't just have model services, but we also have persistent agents that was hosted directly in the portal and could be controlled and managed like most enterprise companies demanded. And finally, in November 2025, at the Microsoft Ignite conference, we saw the latest rebranding with the name switching from Azure AI Foundry to Microsoft Foundry. Together with this name change, there was also a kind of V2 of the portal, where the services got more evolved and workflows was introduced. As of this recording in December 2025, the new V2 portal of the Microsoft Foundry is still in preview. So you can still switch back and forward, but the new portal is the future, and it looks like this. And this is what we are gonna go walk through in the rest of this video. In the new portal, there are three main sections: Discovery, Build, and Operate, which you access from the top right. Discovery is a gallery of what models and tools the Foundry portal offers. As of this recording, there are 11,251 models which you can choose. And this is an impressive number, but in reality, most of them are actually from Hugging Face, like 10,800 of them. Azure themselves only host 77 models, which is still a lot. And in the agent capabilities, only 43 of those work together with the agent capabilities. And that is mostly the OpenAI models and the ones that use the same OpenAI spec. There are various info on each model, and there's comparison features in the gallery that helps you pick and choose the one model that fits you the best. Discovery also have various tools that they can use together with agents. Again, they have an impressive 1,451 different tools. Most of them are, however, classical logic app connectors. But more interesting, there's various MCP tools, and there's also the ability to make your own tools. Finally, in the discovery section are 14 solution templates, which are various GitHub repo samples. Most of them are in Python, but there's a few of them in C#. Next, we have the build section, which is the most interesting for developers. In here, we have agents, which is persistent agents, where we can create one or more of them using either the GUI or created in code. You can then add skills, knowledge, and memory to them, and you can leverage them using code, or you can publish them to Copilot, Microsoft Copilot, or Microsoft Teams. We will cover agents in much more details in subsequent parts of this series. You also have in the build section the newest addition to Foundry, which is workflows. Workflows is simply just multiple agents stringed together in a set of steps in order to solve more complex tasks. We will again have details in a later part of this series. The build section also have the model section, but not as a gallery, but more what models you have actually deployed in order to use the agents. So you can either use these models you deploy in the agents or directly in your code without agents. It is also here you control how the model is hosted, what throughput it have, what version it have, and so on. Next up is fine-tuning, and this is, if you need that, you can perform a subset of fine-tuning on certain models. You will need to provide some training data for the fine-tuning and then deploy that fine-tuned model yourself. We will not cover fine-tuning in this series as it's very rarely used and is only a sort of last resort for very, very niche and specialized scenarios. Next up, we have tools, knowledge, and data. These are essentially just where you create and define the capabilities of agents. So for example, you define an MCP server or you hook up to a vector store as a knowledge, and that is the configurations that you then hook up to your agents. The final two entries in the build sections are evaluation and guardrails. Evaluations being that you can add some data sets to your models that you can train them against. So you can make a model or an agent, you give it the training set, you tweak your code and your agent, and you see if it becomes better or worse, and if there's handle of the quality and security at the time. And finally, guardrails allows you to guard against certain usage of an agent like sexual content, self-harm, hate speech, and so on. So if you have certain use cases that deviate from the out-of-the-box default guardrails, it could, for example, be that you had a medical AI that need to have certain words be allowed in certain areas that would perhaps hit sexual content or hate content and so on. While it could also be that you want to have them even more strict, like for example in a kids app where you want to block certain things in a higher level of detail than the defaults. The final section in Microsoft Foundry is the operate part. This is where you control all the individual parts of agents, tool, knowledge, and so on. Because behind the scenes, there are still Azure services blob storage, databases, and so on. You also can see a lot of stats in here and control quotas and user access control in all the control parts and control planes of the Foundry portal. So this is everything in this video. In the next videos, we will primarily dive into the build section, where we will go from just knowing the portal now to actually building something on top of it. So see you there.